Well, this morning we are concluding our series called The Missing Element. We've been taking a look at one of the things that we believe is missing in our culture, in the world around us. And so we've been diving into this topic of dealing with pride and humility and how do we navigate this system, right? But one of the things I was thinking about this week as we begin this discussion today, how many of you remember the show Dirty Jobs with Mike Rowe? Anybody remember this show? This guy would travel the country, he would travel the world actually, and he would showcase some of the work that people do to make life happen. And so he would work alongside of them for about a day, and they would show us all the funny parts of this, like the great clips of it. One of the things that this guy did was, never forget this, he went with somebody to work, and that person, what their job was they were the city, they cleaned out the city's septic tank. I mean, that is like, I can't think of a dirtier job. That's dirty, right? Then another time, he followed along with a roadkill collector. Who knew, right? That's apparently a job that you need to go pick that stuff up. That's just nasty. And then there's this one where my skin started to crawl. He would climb inside of a cement truck into the back of a cement truck that's spinning, carrying the truck or the cement, and he would have to chisel away the dried concrete in there to clean it out. So he's cement truck cleaner for a day. That's just crazy. Like, there's no chance that I would be getting into one of those things. But basically, all of the dirty jobs that he would go and do and highlight, if it was nasty, if it was the dirtier, the messier, the better, right? It got better ratings, better reviews. And so for 7 years, he traveled around and showcased some of the dirtiest jobs that we see in America. But today, I want to just highlight one of the dirty jobs that I think that you and I have a potential to step into. When my wife Tiffany and I first got married, I used to work on a fishing boat. It was called the Doris May. It was a 100-foot fishing boat, and we would take people out fishing at night. So from about 6 o'clock, we would leave the dock, and we would get back at midnight. And my job on the boat was to make sure that you had a really good time. So like if you were like the kind of person that you didn't really like, you didn't know how to tie a knot in your hook, okay, I'll do that for you. I'll tie it for you. And then maybe you're the kind of person that's like, I don't really like bait, and so I don't really want to touch that. Okay, I'll bait the hook for you. And then you're the guy that's like, there's something tugging on my line, and I'll be the guy that like reels it in for you. But then it got me thinking, like, well, what are you even doing here? Like, if you don't like to do any of this stuff, why are you out on this boat, right? And so my job was to care for all these people that were out on the water. And yes, we saw some incredible sights. And yes, there was some really stupid people that came out and did some really dumb stuff. Loads of funny stories on this boat. But at the end of the night, every fish that they'd caught, they would throw in this, burlap bag, and they would like drag it to the back of the boat where we had our fillet station. And they would just leave like loads of fish, and they'd say, yeah, can you fillet these up for us? We would spend literally an hour and a half at the end of every night just filleting hundreds of pounds of fish over and over and over again. Well, we had a standing rule in my house. The rule was that I wasn't allowed to enter into the house until I had fully changed out of my clothes, like out of the clothes that I had been wearing on the boat. I'd get back home around 2 o'clock, and 2 o'clock in the morning, and there would be a bucket of bleach water sitting on the back porch where my clothes were supposed to go into before I ever even came inside to get a shower. Have you ever worked a job that is so dirty that it's like no amount of showering will ever make you feel clean again? Some of you are like, yeah, I worked in a Mexican restaurant. Like, I totally understand that. I did that too. There's that distinct smell that travels with you there as well. But there is an opportunity for us today to embrace, I think, some of the lower tasks that feel insignificant or that can feel dirty and maybe even grimy. And so today we want to learn from Jesus, from his example, what it means to do a dirty job. So I'd invite you to turn over in your Bibles to John chapter 13. If you didn't bring a Bible with you or you don't have one, there's some Bibles sporadically throughout the room, every other chair about. We'd love for you to take one of those home if you want it, or if you want a new Bible, whatever. That's a gift for you. You can take that. But today, we're in John chapter 13. John is the fourth book in the New Testament. So if you kind of open the Bible halfway, go a little bit more to the right, you'll run into the book of John. specifically chapter 13, where we see the story of Jesus' time here on earth. Like, it tells the story of what Jesus did, the actions and where he went and what he said and how he lived his life while he spent time on earth. And so in John 13, we read this story, a story that may be familiar to some of you. It says this: "It was just before the Passover feast, and Jesus knew that the time had come for him to leave this world and to go back to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he now showed them the full extent of his love. The evening meal was being served, and the devil had already prompted Judas Iscariot, son of Simon, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, he took off his outer clothing, and he wrapped a towel around his waist. And after that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. So he came to Simon Peter, who said to him, 'Lord, are you going to wash my feet?' And Jesus replied to him, 'You don't realize what I'm doing now, but later you'll understand.' 'No,' said Peter, 'you'll never wash my feet.' And Jesus answered, 'Unless I wash your feet, you have no part with me.' 'Then, Lord,' Simon Peter said, 'not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well.' And Jesus answered, 'A person who has had a bath needs only to wash his feet. His whole body is clean. And you are clean, though not every one of you.' For he knew who was going to betray him. And that's why he said not everyone was clean. Now, when he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. 'Do you understand what I've done for you?' he said. 'You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that's what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you should also wash one another's feet. I've set you an example that you should do as I've done for you. I tell you the truth, that no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them.'" All right, let's talk about some dirty jobs here. Even if you're not a huge Bible reader, or even if you wouldn't call yourself a church person, my guess is that most of you in this room have heard this story. You know a bit about what Jesus did when he washed his disciples' feet. It's actually kind of a strange custom that they used to do. We don't do it anymore today, thankfully. Like, if you come over to my house, I'm not washing your feet. But this is something that Jesus did to demonstrate to his disciples how to put godly humility into practice in your world. And so after rolling up his sleeves, after getting kind of down and dirty, it says in verse 15 that Jesus said, "I've set an example that you should do as I've done for you." Or basically, Jesus is saying, here's a model. Here is a platform. Here is a way, a template for you to practice biblical humility in the service of people that you love. But not only that, in verse 17 he attaches, there's a promise here as well. It says, "Now that you know these things, you'll be blessed if you do them." You'll be blessed if you do them. See, in other words, it's not like, okay, so now you just know all this stuff, right? Like, we've been talking about humility. Now this will be the third week of that. If you missed week 1 and 2, you should go catch up on the podcast for sure, because there's good things that I hope that you learn. I hope that we take these things and we learn them. But Jesus says it's not just enough to learn it, to cognitively know it. He says that we also have to do it. We have to live this out. It changes the way that we live our life. But if we follow Jesus' example, if we look at it, there's two interesting qualities about humility, biblical humility, that I think we want to pick up on today. And if you're taking notes, we print them in your program for you each week. The first thing that biblical humility is it's stinky. It just stinks. To be humble means that you need to be, you could possibly be featured on dirty jobs. You could possibly get a little messy. And the second thing is it's shocking. True humility, it often contains an element of surprise that startles those people who witness it, who see humility. They're like, wait a second, there's something different about that kind of humility. Humility is stinky, it's shocking, and I want to show you today how these two qualities actually, they work together and hopefully get you thinking about a humble act that you can do this week to serve other people around you, to serve people that you love. You guys ready? Let's start with the first one. First one is humility is stinky. The first principle is that it's stinky. And here's the thing, summer's coming. Summer is literally right around the corner. That heat wave is coming. That humidity is coming. The rainstorms have started up. It starts to smell a little bit more like suntan lotion. Some of you need to use it a little bit more. I saw some people in the first service. It was like raccoons came out of the woodwork, right? And I was like, okay, there's this thing called SPF 50. Put it on your face. So there's summer is here. But there's another way that I know summer's coming. Because I smelled some of you coming in. You got your flip-flops on, and you're ready to go. The sweaty feet syndrome is coming out of the gate right about now, right? And you can't avoid it. You can't avoid it. But if you think wearing flip-flops in church is disrespectful, then let me just introduce you to the way that Jesus lived his life and the way that they lived in that day and age. See, back in the Middle East, pretty much everybody, if you wore shoes, you wore a sandal. You wore this kind of strappy sandal that looked something pretty similar to this, actually, where it was open and you just had some straps that held a bit of leather to your feet. You traveled by foot. I don't know if they were like rainbows or Birkenstocks, whatever. They're a little bit like this, right? And so let's say that you arrived at somebody's house. You had walked there. You weren't getting an Uber to somebody's house. So you arrive there at the front door, and the person greets you. And they say, here, quick, have a seat, okay? To which you start to take your shoes off, and yeah, I'm promising you don't want to go near here. This has got 5 hours of foot sweat in it. And so they would take their shoes off, and then they would call over their house servant. And their house servant would come, and they would remove your sandals for you. They would have a basin of water and a pitcher where they would pour water over your feet and then begin to scrub off the roadway, the dirt and the grime that has clung to the bottom of your feet. But not only that, your feet, their feet, would, because they were walking all the time in open sandals, would get cut up. They would get nicks. They would get calluses. They would get blisters that would open and ooze, and it would be nasty. And the inside of those cuts and scrapes would be just all kinds of grossness. And it was somebody's job. It was somebody's job to clean this, right? They were filthy. And this servant showed hospitality by cleaning other people's feet. It was a dirty job. And it literally stunk. Like right now, there's like a little kind of like Charlie Brown cloud of like whatever over those shoes right there. But when I was in high school, I was always barefoot. Always barefoot. I loved to play ultimate frisbee with my friends, and so we'd be running through the fields, and my feet, I would get home at the end of the day, my feet would be just green. Like it would look like I'd been running barefoot. And then we also loved to play in the woods, because I grew up in Pennsylvania, right outside of Philadelphia, in the suburbs of Philly, and so I grew up in Pennsylvania, and we would run through the woods and all this stuff, and again, I prefer to be barefoot, even now. That's why I love Florida, right? And so I must have gone through this patch of poison ivy at one point in time. And it was as if that vine like flossed every single toe. Like it just worked its way through and figured out how to get oil in between every toe. The webbing of all 5 of my toes was like covered in the blisters from poison ivy. Again, I'm a junior in high school. Very little self-control. So I'm like there picking at them and it's like scratching, because there's that sense of relief when you itch poison ivy. Anybody get poison ivy? Anybody? Like, okay, so we can relate to one another. Highly allergic right here. So I open up these blisters on my feet, and then again just go back to doing what I do best, running running barefoot everywhere. Well, then the next week I go off to camp, and camp is probably not the cleanest place, and the showers in camp are probably like the cleanest place in the world. And I begin to notice that my foot starting to get like hot. Like just my foot is hot. It's weird, right? And then it starts to get puffy. Like the whole foot starts like swelling up. And then this cool line started running up the outside of my leg, like a black line, and I'm like, that's a new vein. I haven't seen that one before. That's pretty interesting. Then I started to like have to hobble to get places, because it was so painful. I said to one of our camp counselors, like, I think something's going on here. I'm not entirely sure. Might need some attention. They're like, oh, yeah, you need to go home. Like, my mom, go home. My mom brings me to the doctor. The doctor looks at me, a junior in high school, and says, listen, you're not getting off the couch for 48 hours. You're not moving for 48 hours. I'm like, what? There's no way I'm not moving for 48 hours. I'm like a rambunctious ADD, like junior in high school, like going everywhere. He goes, no, I'm dead serious. If you move off this couch, if we don't get this under control, the next step, like if that line, and he drew this mark on my thigh, so if that line crosses this line, we're going to have to start talking about amputating. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? 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 That's not happening. I'm a junior in high school. Like, we don't talk about amputating legs. And he said, yeah, you've actually contracted a really serious form of cellulitis. It started in the webbing of your toes, and it's worked its way into your bloodstream, and it's moving its way towards your heart. And it's an aggressive form of cellulitis that we need to get under control now. So what do? Well, here's some medicine, but the most important thing that you need to do is you need to stay off of it, and you need to wash it repeatedly. You need to soak it in Epsom salts, and you need to wash it clean. The way for me to return to health was found by my mom kneeling by the couch, probably on a stool very similar to this, with this nasty hoof in her lap, and she would be carefully washing my feet. Nasty. Like, that's dirty. That's gross. Like, even on a good day, these are gross, but let alone with like poison ivy like strewn all over it. It's disgusting. In fact, the task of washing somebody's feet back in Jesus' day was so degrading, so low, so humiliating that Jewish slaves were actually forbidden to do it. Only the lowest Gentile slave, or the outcast of the community, was allowed to wash other people's feet because it was so lowly. See, what Jesus is showing us is that one of the most powerful ways to practice humility is to perform a single, unglamorous task that nobody else is willing to do, a dirty job. See, but if you're willing to do this out of love, out of sacrifice, as unto Christ, it communicates very powerfully to the world around you that you are greater than me. See, right now, for instance, you guys may not know this, but around in our church right now, there are people in this building who are practicing humility on your behalf. And sometimes it literally stinks. Like, behind us on this wall over here is our nursery. There's some people in there who are caring for your infants, your toddlers. And honestly, some of them deserve combat pay for what they've been doing, right? But I want to introduce you to one person. Her name is Emily. She's going to be mortified if I even point her out. But this is Emily, a bit like Taylor Swift. Get it? But Emily serves in our mini hub every single week. And every week, Emily goes out of her way to serve the children of our volunteers. So during the first service, we have our volunteers' kids can go to this place called the Mini Hub. It's a great place for them to just relax, hang out, enjoy, play games with one another, because then they get to go to kids programming during the second hour. And Emily is like herding cats back there. There's all these rambunctious kids that are just bouncing off the walls, having a great time. I've walked by multiple times. This isn't like a one time I caught her doing this. Multiple times I've walked by, and I've seen Emily down on the ground with little kids, and she's like hunched over playing games with them and like serving these kids to make sure that they have the greatest experience at church. But not only that, I know that Emily also goes out of her way to bring games from home that aren't in kind of like our repertoire so that kids don't get tired of it. She goes out of her way to serve these kids. But none of you would ever know that. None of you would ever know that Emily does this week after week after week after week with a smile on her face. See, she's like 2 steps removed. She's 2 degrees backstage behind the scenes. And it's an act of service that we all get the benefit from. She's saying, in honor of Christ, you are greater than me. I'm going to roll up my sleeves. I'm going to perform an unglamorous, kind of dirty job for the glory of Christ. You guys, you see what I mean? Like, humility, it can stink. Humility stinks. But it's of great worth in God's eyes. And the quality one of humility stinking, it leads to question one, and that is there a dirty job that you can perform for people this week in your care. Maybe it's that you've got some family members, some older family members, and you can serve those people. There's people in your world that you can take care of and not outsource to kind of some visiting nurses or things. Or maybe there's an opportunity, there's a neighbor like that you live right by that you know has difficulty with certain tasks. And maybe you can put their needs ahead of your own. See, on the evening of Jesus' betrayal, he said, he wants to demonstrate the depth of his love and his care for his disciples. And what he did was he took a towel and a basin, a towel and a bowl of water, and he performed one of the least sexiest tasks in the ancient world. He washed their feet. And guys, this was shocking. Humility is shocking. Not like, surprise! Like, it's not like, oh, man, this is shocking. It's startling. Like, it's riveting. It grabs your attention, and you can barely look away from what's happening. There's an oil painting by the guy by the name of Ford Madox Brown. This hangs in the Tate Museum in London. He painted this in the 1800s. This is a depiction of Jesus washing Peter's feet and the disciples looking on around him. I want you to take a look at specifically Peter's face. His face, he's got like, his posture's a bit like frustrated. His hands are folded in like I don't understand what's going on here. And his brow is sort of furrowed down like, what is happening? As if to say like, what's going on? But the disciples in the back, this one right here, he's like holding his head in the sense of, am I actually seeing this right? And then these two over here are kind of consoling one another, like it's okay, this moment will pass. We don't have to watch this much longer. Because if you notice, like they wouldn't have expected this. Their teacher, their master, their Lord, the one that they've followed, their rabbi, has taken on the task of the lowest person in their community. The foot washer. The one that you call and you're like, hey, come wash this guy's feet. Jesus willingly steps down and washes the feet of his friends. You almost wonder if it's like more awkward when you know the person. Like, Jesus just breaks everything. He sets this example for us that he's saying, like, there is nothing that is beneath you. There's nothing that is beneath me. And in this moment that Jesus gets down on his hands and knees, Scripture says, Peter objects. Peter's like, you're not washing my feet. Not because he's got sensitive feet or like he doesn't want to be touched. No, he said, you're not washing my feet because I cannot imagine my Lord, my Savior, Jesus Christ, doing such a dirty job. There's no world that exists that God should be doing this to me. But John 13:6, he came to Simon Peter, and Simon Peter says, Lord, you're not going to wash my feet. And Jesus replies and says, you do not realize what I'm doing right now, but later you'll understand. No, said Peter, you'll never wash my feet. Jesus answered, unless I wash you, you have no part with me. See, humility, it contains the element of surprise because no one expects someone of your stature, of your position, with your title to stoop down and to go to such a low level, to forget about how you look and focus with a laser beam intention on the needs of somebody else. That is revolutionary. That is like, it blows people's minds. Humility is shocking. It wows other people with love. Surprising people beneath you when you're the one that has the power is an incredibly humble way to serve them, to surprise them with your service. See, Peter recognizes Jesus' power with shock. He says, are you kidding me? This is God. This is the Lord, God in flesh, and he's washing feet like a slave. So here's a question. Has anybody been shocked or wowed by your humility? Where you've put someone else in front of you to the point where they're like, wow, I've never seen that before. So let me take this out of the realm of like home and family and switch gears a bit towards those of us that work in offices or wherever you work from a 9 to 5. Maybe especially those of you who are in charge or you have people that report to you or are beneath you. Um, when was the last time that you used your position of power and influence to humbly serve someone beneath you? Not to get them to do something for you, but simply to take time to do something for them, to demonstrate to them that you care and you have concern for them as a person. I think it's about 4 years ago now, our church that I was involved in New Jersey, called Liquid Church, we did an event we called it the Superhero 5K. And so we set up this 5K, and thousands of people showed up, and we ran this 5K together. This is me and my daughter, Grace, much smaller back then. And we were running, and not only did I run the race, but I was also responsible for setting up the kind of the after party. So we had this festival out in the square of town, and we had bounce houses and face painting, and we had all kinds of food vendors and lots of great things to hang out and continue to do. And so I was responsible for the food portion of that day, making sure that all the vendors were there and they had everything they needed. But I had to be there for setup. I ran the race, and then I had to stay all the way through to teardown. I was kind of in a lower level position at the church at the time, and I found myself doing a lot of grunt work, and it was fine. It was totally fine. But there was a few people who were much higher than me in the food chain. And one of these guys is named Rich. Rich was on the lead team there. He was one of the 4 most influential people in our organization, right? So he was one of the ones that, he had a say in the hiring and firing. Basically, we could put it that way. And I'll never forget, on the day of this 5K race, I'm beat, I'm worn out, and I'm bringing the last chair, loading the very last chair up onto the truck, and we're like, can we just go home? And here comes Rich. He's like, hey, wait. We got a couple more things. And he's sweating. He's been working. And it's become apparent that Rich has stayed from the very beginning till the very end, the last minute. And I was like, wait a second. If there's a person here in the organization who could have easily been like, hey, listen, great job, guys. You guys got this. Awesome. I'm going to, kind of applaud you, pat you on the back, slap you on the butt, and send you home. Like, great. It could have been him. He could have been like, peace. He made it a point to stay to the very end, and that I've never forgotten that. He probably doesn't even know that he did it. It's probably not even a thing that he thinks about. But for me, somebody that reported to him, it changed the way that I lead. It changed the trajectory of my leadership because I watched as somebody who could have used their power to skirt the hard work, step in and do it alongside of us. And I forever am like, you know what? The heart of a leader is shown by the ways that they serve others. Guys, don't miss this, that true humility, the type of humility that changes people and changes the world, it doesn't flaunt your position. Instead, it uses your power to bless and serve someone beneath you. Some of you, I get it, some of you have tuned out because you're like, well, I don't have a title. I don't have anybody that reports to me. I'm just a very normal guy. I would tell you that you're fooling yourself. You're fooling yourself to think that you do not have power and influence in this world. And I would invite you to figure out who are the people that you have the ability to influence, and don't miss out on the fact that God has given you a position in this world. And he has surrounded you with people that you can serve in even the smallest ways. And Jesus gives us that example, right? In verse 3, it says, Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power and that he had come from God and was returning to God. See, I don't want you to miss this. Right here, Jesus knew. In the moment before Jesus went and grabbed a towel and grabbed a basin of water, he knew that the Father had put everything underneath of him. Everything was in his power. He was the most powerful person in the room. He knew that he had come from God and was going back to God. And what does he do? Verse 4, it says he gets up from the meal. He takes off his outer garment, his outer robe, and he wraps a towel around his waist. And he stoops low and serves other people. See, in the ancient culture, the ruler's robe was his symbol of authority. It was his position. It showed, like, this is who I am. It's this, it elevates your status, the robe that you had on. And Jesus shed his authority. He shed that robe in order to stoop down, and he puts on a towel. He puts on the tools of a slave to wash the feet of his friends. See, he's not too big to do the small stuff. He drops his title and picks up a towel. And we've been saying this entire series that humility is the noble choice to forgo your status and use your power to serve other people. So at work, if you've got people underneath of you, or you're in the meeting with direct reports, what do you do when it dawns on you that you're the most important person in the room? What do you do? Jesus gives us an answer. You shed your symbol of authority, and you serve others around you. I dare you to try this. Bosses, managers, leaders, I dare you to try this. Change the world this way, one decision at a time. You have an opportunity to make sure that people know that you think that you are greater than me. That you are greater than me. See, the world would tell us, the world tells me, it tells you that in order to show how important you are, to wield authority, we want to hold authority by kind of pulling rank, or by flexing your muscle, or by raising your voice, projecting that your authority on other people. But you know what? You'll get people to do stuff for sure, because they know you can fire them. But will they know that you love them? Will they trust you? Will their loyalty and allegiance be given to you? I'm convinced that one of the missing elements in our world is humility. That simple, humble servant leadership can change the world around us and be like Jesus. We've been invited to follow Christ, and in following Christ, to live a life like Christ. And part of that is the opportunity to get down and dirty for Jesus. See, Jesus served people in spite of who he is, in spite of the fact that he was their master, their teacher, their Lord, and in spite of who they were. Ordinary fishermen, high school dropouts, tax collectors, just regular people. And Jesus served them. But this pride and arrogance pops up in Peter, and he's like, Lord, you're not going to wash my feet. Never. And Jesus answered him, and he said, unless I wash you, you have no part with me. And what does Peter say? Then he's like, acts kind of cocky. He's like, well then, Lord, wash everything. Wash my head, my hands, everything. What a wise guy, right? Like, Peter doesn't deserve to have his feet washed by Christ. But humility has nothing to do with deserving. None of us deserve anything. It's rooted in grace. Humility comes from a place of grace, which is the lavish love of God that's been extended to those of us in need. But you know what? What God thinks is truly great? When someone just stoops down and he sets aside their title and trades it in for a towel. When somebody stops and they get low in order to simply serve. So here's the challenge as we conclude this series together. As we've spent 3 weeks just learning about humility, the challenge is, how do we now go from here and go to the places where we live, the neighborhoods and our family, and go and do? How do we live this out? Jesus says to his followers this way, now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I've set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Guys, we don't wash people's feet very often. But there are hundreds of ways that you can change this world for Christ by serving other people. So how are you going to put this into practice? How can others know that you believe that you are greater than me? See, maybe now it's time to get down and dirty here at Hope City Church. Maybe now it's time for you to plug into the dream team. And we've got this group of people that set up church. We call them our roadies team. And they come on Friday nights in order to create this space so that people show up on Sunday and can meaningfully connect with Jesus in a distraction-free environment. Or maybe you want to be like Emily and you want to serve kids. You want to make it possible for kids to enjoy their experience with Jesus. Maybe it's the opposite of what you grew up. And you're like, man, I don't want any child to feel the way that I felt. And you want to create that environment. We've got a place for you with Hope City Kids. We would love for you to be a part of that. Or maybe you hate the feeling of not knowing where to go or what to do when you arrive at a new place. Our hospitality team is here to serve people so they never feel that way. So they never feel like, I don't really know where to go. Do I belong here? All that kind of thing. There is a space for you. There is a place for you to practice humility, on a weekly basis. On our dream team, we've got people from every walk of life. We've got people in all ages and stages. And together, we're saying, you are greater than me. Together, we are saying this each and every week, that there are people that we want to serve other people rather than be served. We choose humility over glory. And there's a spot for you. I would love it for you to join us. And you can sign up at our Next Steps booth. You can just ask people for some information on that, or write it on the back of your Connect card there. But listen to what Jesus has to say about what happens when we trust him and obey. John 13:17 says, now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them, if you do it. See, the Bible promises us a special blessing for those who not only just intellectually agree that humility as a concept, but those who get dirty doing it, that say, you are greater than me. So I want to invite you to develop your humility muscle this week, to exercise it in a stinky and quite possibly shocking way. Maybe it's at home. Maybe it's in the office. Maybe it's in your neighborhood. And maybe it's right here at Hope City Church. But I know that if we take off your robe, you lay down your authority, and serve other people, it brings honor to God. It brings honor to God, and it points other people to him. Guys, I can't wait to see what happens. I can't wait to hear the stories of what God does through you when you choose humility.